Hey all, and welcome back to Let's Talk Assassin's Creed, your number one podcast for all things Assassin's Creed. In today's episode we're going to discuss about the Isu, also known as the first civilization. Before we dive in, I would like to give a shout out to Assassin's Creed Wiki fandom for helping me fill in some of my lore memory gaps. I would highly recommend this website to anyone who would like to dive in and know more about the Assassin's Creed universe. So who were the Isu? Well, what we know of the Isu is very limited. We do know they were a race of technically advanced humanoids, and that they were the first race on Earth. We are still unsure whether or not these were the official first race, or they were the evolution of a previous race before humans. What we do know about the Isu is they had a very unique biology compared to humans. They had a triple DNA helix that gave them a significant biological advantage over humans, including an extra sixth sense. This sixth sense is seen in the Assassin's Creed universe as eagle vision, which, as you know, is a lot of assassins through the Brotherhood have got this. Now, I will be keeping things spoiler free, but if you play Assassin's Creed Odyssey, you'll see how some of the assassins later on down the line, where they got their genetic makeup from for the free DNA helix. No spoilers in this episode, I'm sorry about that. Other episodes will contain spoilers, and I will give you a warning beforehand. We do also know that the Isu had a telepathic ability, something I'm sure that the devs and the creators of the universe will explore in the future. So, let's go over the history of the Isu. And the history of the Isu is long and rich tapestry of war and death, and that theoretically shaped the world we have now. There is mentions of a few civil wars between the Isu that created pieces of Eden. For example, the Shroud of Eden, used for healing. I'm not going to go into too much depth about the Piece of Eden in this podcast, but I will be looking at more pieces of Eden through the Wiki fandom and through the games, and compiling a list for either a two-part series or just one huge episode exploring more. But one of the biggest effects that the Isu did have on the world was actually me and you, theoretically. In the game universe, they created the humans. And the reason they did this is they wanted a slave race of sorts, and they thought they would create humans, something that they could dominate us. But as you're aware, the Isu aren't walking among us in the games, and the Isu are rarely seen in games except for Odyssey, which gives a huge face full of Isu. But we do know they're there in myths and legends, so it seems the Isu have shaped humanity in a big way. But what are the Isu? Which, if you've been playing the games, you will know where they are, what happened, but if you're new to the universe, what happened to them is quite a shock, to be honest, but something that's seen in human history before, and that is they had their own greed for power. By creating humans, they effectively created the downfall to their society, and that is because they used what's known as Pieces of Eden, or Apple of Eden, as you see in Desmond Miles, Altair and Ezio Auditore use, which we used to actually control humans in a mind control sort of way. But the problem with this is, due to, I believe it was inbreeding or an evolution, two humans developed a triple helix DNA. And the significance of the triple helix DNA gave them control over the Piece of Eden, which made them less susceptible to the abilities. As you saw in Assassin's Creed 2, Desmond Miles is able to wield an Apple of Eden and not suffer consequences. This is because Desmond's makeup is triple helix DNA, same as Altair and Ezio Auditore. And now a few assassins in the game do have this triple helix. Layla Hassan in Odyssey and Origins has the triple helix, and so does Cassandra. So these two humans were known as Adam and Eve, and they led the humans into a 10-year war between the Isus. And this 10-year war was filled with tons of death, even recorded that they killed Minerva's father with a club, which is why Minerva now hates humans, which is understandable. But during the 10-Year War, there was a solar flare which was destined to wipe out all of mankind. Now, the Isu had the abilities, using Pieces of Eden, to circumvent the solar flare and stop it from hitting Earth. But the issue is, because they were trapped in this 10-year war, they weren't able to prepare themselves for what was to come. And when the solar flare hit, it wiped out majority of Isu and majority of the human race, creating a near extinction event. Something that they did predict would happen again on the 21st of the 12th, 2012. Now, because of this huge catastrophe and the devastation afterwards, the Isu were no longer the most powerful beings on Earth, and they had to breed with humans to survive, which is why during the course of breeding and crossbreeding over the years, only a select few of humans carry the triple helix. One of the most famous people to have a triple helix DNA was Cassandra. Now, I'm not going to go into any details, but Cassandra was able to wield the spear of Hermes, I believe, because of her triple helix DNA, and her father, Leonidas, who we all know from the Great Battle of 300, was also a famous user of the spear because of his triple helix DNA. So, not everybody may have the triple helix DNA, but it's still out there, and it is a big source of knowledge and power for both the Templars and the Assassins. Now, Desmond Miles, who was a famous protagonist from Assassin's Creed 1 to Assassin's Creed 3, he is mentioned in 4, but I'm not going to go into spoilers. He was able to unlock an Isu temple using an Apple of Eden, and use through projections of 2 Isu, which I'm not going to mention the names because that would class as a spoiler, as if you follow that story, I don't know how to word it without sounding vague, but if I told you everything now, it would mean it would spoil the game, and if you're new to these sort of games, it would ruin it. I would recommend checking out Assassin's Creed 3 Remaster on the PlayStation Store now, or an Xbox Store. Fantastic remaster, and you can see more of how the Isu, how Desmond Miles was able to work with the Isu to circumvent the destruction that was going to happen on the 21st December 2012. But I will love to go into more details of Assassin's Creed 3 in the future. I will do tons of episodes on it. Now, back to the Isu. Now that the Isu are gone and humans are left, one of the biggest mysteries is, where are they now? Because we know the Isus have a very long lifespan and they're practically immortal. And Odyssey showed us Isu in one of the DLCs, I'm not going to spoil it, are still alive. And Greek mythology was affected by the Isu through the Minotaur, the Gorgon. They were all Isu creation, which means the Isu have so much of an impact on the Earth that if you took them out of the Assassin's Creed universe, you're left with a civil war that really has no backdrop. And the reason for this is the Pieces of Eden that the Isu have left behind have so much power that the Templars want to harness it, because they know if they had an Apple of Eden or the Observatory from Assassin's Creed Black Flag, they could control humanity through power and through corruption, making it a peace at last for humanity through dictatorship. But the Assassins want to take the Isu technology from the Templars and create a freedom for mankind. But to me, and this is speculation, if the Assassins took all the Isu artifacts and kept them to make sure mankind's free, doesn't that make the Assassins the most powerful and scariest faction? they have this power, and a lot of assassins have the triple helix DNA, meaning they can wield these artifacts. If assassins and Templars went to war, then due to the technology that the Isu left behind and the third helix, the assassins could beat the Templars, and the assassins could theoretically hold the world to ransom. That is all speculation and my own spin on things, but the Isu are a mystery still. We are 11 games in the series, and we still barely know who the Isu are. There is some history discovered through the comics and through the games, especially Revelations, where you are trapped inside the Animus, and I'm not going to name any names again because I want this to be spoiler free as best as I can, but one of the people you meet in the Animus has gathered tons of information on Adam and Eve and why they led the 10-year war against the Isu and what happened next. I'm hoping after Odyssey, which I do agree to some fans it was a bit of a letdown, but the Isu they showed us, I'm hoping the developers will go into more detail, because I think after 10 games of Assassins vs Templars, I would really love to see more about the Isu, because they are the backbone of Assassin's Creed. We may believe Assassin's Creed is Assassins vs Templars, but they're always fighting for a piece of Eden which are left behind by the Isu, and the only reason why Assassins and some Templars can wield the piece of Eden is because of the Isu triple DNA, which means that in Assassin's Creed it's a war between the Isu, who we don't know if they're all gone, and Odyssey showed us that maybe they're not all gone, and the Assassins and the Templars, and maybe in the future we might see the Isu try and take over. We do know, which I'm disappointed by, one Isu did try to take over from the event of Assassin's Creed 4 by a Sage. Now a Sage is an Isu reincarnate. I'm trying to explain it without spoiling. It's kind of hard. I might have to rethink my spoiler-free strategy. But a Sage is essentially, every so often, an Isu is reincarnated in human form, but it's the lover of one Isu. I can't remember. I'm gonna have to play Black Flag to get my memory back, but he doesn't have memory of his past life, and he keeps reincarnating. And Sages are quite powerful Isu descendants themselves. And after the events of Black Flag, there was a bit of a gap of what happened with the Sage and his lover. But I do know in the comics that storyline was finished, which is a slight disappointment because I do believe it was something we need to finish in game. Now, the lore for Assassin's Creed is a rabbit hole, and you can get lost in it, and I have spent this past week digging through everything to deliver the basics of the Isu and the impact on the games, and I'm hoping this has helped you understand a little bit more on the Isu and their impact on the games. If you would like to know more, again, please feel free to check out Assassin's Creed Wikia Fandom. Great place to find more in-depth knowledge that would probably take me hours to explain. Tune in next week where I'm going to answer some of your questions from some of my friends, and also I'm going to discuss how Assassin's Creed has grown over the years and how possibly the amount of changes it's had could be for the better. Thank you all for tuning in. I really hope you enjoy this podcast. Remember, you can find me on social media on Let's Creed Talk Assassin's Creed, and you can also email me at assassincreedletstalk@gmail.com. Thank you again for tuning in, and I'll see you next week.